very privileged to have Shri Suresh Prabhu with us, Union Minister for Commerce and Industry. He's left the South Korean premier and we'll have to go back to him. And so he's just been very kind. Suresh needs no real introduction to all of us. We watched his career as he has gone from industry, then to power, then to railways, and now to commerce and industry. And in each of those positions, he has brought not only great political backing and experience, but has also brought always a sense of inquiry and always a sense of openness about being able to look at the evidence that people produce. We ourselves have had a great deal of work with him in the Railway Ministry, as well as now in the Commerce and Industries Ministry. I'm not going to stand between him and you, but allow him to address us. So, Shri Suresh Prabhu.
Good morning, friends. Let me thank my friend, Mr. Shekhar Shah, for firstly organizing this event and also to invite me for it. The real challenge now before the world is how to steer the global economy to higher growth in the context of so many challenges we are facing. Some are fundamental in nature, some are because of certain intervention by some countries. But overall, it's a challenging situation. And therefore, in that context, the national economies will have to progress, factoring into this kind of new issues that are emerging. And therefore, the role of policy will be very fundamental. The policy, and obviously its practice, will drive the growth or will not be able to take it to your true potential if the policy is not right or it is not implemented in the right manner. So you are dealing with the first part, and I have to deal with both the parts. I have to make policy as well as implement it. But I'm sure policy making should not be the sole domain of the government itself. We should try to get as much inputs as possible from all the stakeholders, and particularly the organizations like NCR and others who can think about issues in a very dispassionate manner and then therefore offer a correct policy advice. Policies, if not framed properly, then even if you implement it in toto, will obviously get a disastrous results. So the first and fundamental issue is how to frame policy. And I think we in the government are always looking for ideas so that we frame a policy around those ideas. I have a huge experience of dealing with this because this is my 10th cabinet position. And therefore, I don't know how many policies I must have framed and how many I have implemented. But just to give an example of one important policy which is related to the power sector. If you had held this policy forum somewhere in year 2002, 2001, everybody would say that India's biggest problem is power sector. You had huge power shortages. Peak level shortage was probably even 16–17%. There were large leakages. The transmission and distribution losses, which I used to call as theft and dacoity losses, were very high, T&D losses. State electricity boards, which we are nationalized in 1998, entire power sector by creating vertical integrated entities, were in doldrums, losing money. The share of private sector was less than 2%, even 1.5% in a generation. And in that context, everybody was saying, and everybody was offering ideas. You should do this, do that. And of course, there's a good thing about the world is there may be shortage of resources, but idea has never been a short on resources. Ideas are available. People keep giving ideas. And then the problem with the idea is that the next time you meet the person, he said, see, I told you, but you have not done anything. Because luckily, the creator of idea is not responsible for implementing the ideas. So he has a great liberty and a great advantage of not seeing it through. In that context, we consulted large number of people. And I will tell you something very important a little later. And that's what I am just telling this background because for you to understand the context of what are the challenges that face in terms of framing policy and implementing it. And we came out with a new law. The result is we had less than 100,000 megawatts of installed capacity. And down the line today, we have more than 3.5 times of that installed capacity. The peak level shortages are gone. And in fact, in a way, we have more power than we can consume. Of course, that's also partly true because it all depends upon industrial demand picking up, it will change. But this happened in the matter of few years. Of course, it takes, as you know, and my friend is from state of California. And he will tell you that if you want to start a power plant in California, from the date you decide to start a power plant, and by the time you actually commission it, will not be less than 1 decade. Because California has very stringent environmental laws. Their emission standards are even higher than many other states. There are 50 states, maybe some of the higher states, higher norms than other states. So it takes that much time. And now, the ideological issues that are associated with power sector, that means whether you should have a thermal plant or not, that means the funding becomes a challenge. Because some of the funders would say, no, actually I am bound by the mandate that my fund has got, so I cannot lend for thermal power. If you want, you can come back again, and then I can give you money for solar power. When you go back to him again for solar power, he will tell you that's fine, but your profitability seems to be not good because your idea of generating solar power will compete with thermal power. And thermal power is a better base load. You can only take care of peak demand, so it will not happen. So there are so many challenges, but even in California. So I'm telling that one of the, it's of course the biggest economy of US, one of the largest, maybe 6th, 7th largest economy of the world. But that is facing these issues. So in India, to start from concept to reality, even if you take that much time, you can imagine that what we did in 2003 has to take some time because firstly law has to be passed, rules have to be notified, but in less than a decade, India had more power only thanks to that law. How do you say thanks to that law? Because when the private sector participation was less than 1.5%, today the incremental power, that what 2.5 times what we added, 3.5 times what we added, say 250,000, at least 60–70% of that came from private sector, which was not possible because the law did not allow you to do that. In 1948, we had nationalized the law. So this is the kind of policy we framed. There was another policy to take, this was basically generation and many other issues, also allowed distribution. But only policy doesn't help. You have to come out with so many issues related to that. And there was another intervention that we made was on distribution. Unfortunately, distribution didn't go through, despite the fact that I had allocated almost $7 billion, or actually at that time $8 billion, because the rupee dollar has changed over a period of time. $8–9 billion money was set aside for fixing distribution by getting technology. Now, looking back, policy is important, its implementation is more important, but looking through the entire chain is also as important. And when we are doing this law, the trade unions had said, all trade unions, and we have trade unions from the rightist to leftist, ultra-leftist, all of them said that the moment you introduce this bill in the parliament, will go on indefinite strike. So I used to jokingly say, my teacher is also here, Mr. Govind Rao. So I used to say that Karl Marx had said, workers of the world unite. Unfortunately, his successor, his follower never succeeded in doing that. But I said, what is there in this bill that has unified all of you, which Karl Marx never could aspire but could never succeed? And we talked to them, talked through, to a point that finally one trade union said that we'll support this bill on one more condition. I said, please tell me, we have accepted so many conditions. He said, one more condition is that if you don't call me again for a meeting, I will support the bill. So what I am saying is, you will understand that making policy is not easy. Giving idea is simpler, but implementing is very difficult. And then we have to talk to state government because it's a state issue. So what I am saying is, when we give ideas, please keep in mind that ideas without having a proper understanding about the ecosystem, about a context in which you have to work, and making sure that this will be implemented, and what's the end result you want, finally. And everything, every policy that you make, there are costs and benefits. You have to incur some cost, maybe political cost, maybe economic cost, maybe social cost. But if the benefits outweigh the cost, it is still a good policy. But sometimes this cost-benefit analysis is not done rightly, and therefore at the end of it, we land up into difficulties. So I think it's a very important thing for a policy forum to please suggest us ideas which will help us to take India to maybe 10% growth rate. What is that we need to do? So of course, there are very good ideas we have heard for a long time, but there's nothing wrong with the ideas. But again, I am telling you, the navigating these ideas into reality, the kind of political economy in which we operate has to be also kept in mind. But sometimes we should not do it in such a way that just because of pushing something, it doesn't happen anyway, but that even small little outcome that we got, we don't get it. So sometimes even pushing it incrementally makes sense, sometimes changing it totally at the same time makes sense, but all depends upon the political economy in which you operate. So sometimes we may think incremental reforms have no meaning. So we lose out on even that benefit that would have come from incremental reforms. And therefore we must also understand how much we can push and what time we should push. That's a very important element anywhere in the world. It's not just India, anywhere in the world. But in Indian context, it is particularly true because over a period of time, we have learned and we accepted reforms as a necessity. But when we say reform, what is meant by reform? I was always saying, why are you reform? Firstly, that's an important thing. Is the reform an end in itself, or reform is means to an end? And I used to say that if the particular sector, particular issue is not deformed, why should we reform? It should be deformed first. So you must have a proper analysis about what is wrong. That's the baseline. And unless we have that properly analyzed properly, then only we can actually come out with a prescription for reform in a proper manner. And now in India, we are working on quite a few areas. And I think all this will converge finally into something. So one is, we confidently feel that we could achieve a growth rate of more than what we are working on today. And even if you take today's growth rate, 7.6% last quarter and maybe closer to that, we can easily reach a $5 trillion economy in a matter of 8 years. And maybe another 7-8 years from then, will be a $10 trillion economy. But to make it happen, we have to put in so many things in place. That is possible, that is doable, that is something which is now reach, but it will not happen automatically unless we put things in place. So I have prepared a vision for a 5 trillion in which 20% of that will come from manufacturing, which in itself is a great thing because 16% is today's share, and to take it to 20% when the rest of economy is going to grow faster, it itself is an achievement, so we are working on that. Then which are those sectors which will contribute to this 1 trillion Also, we have worked on it. 60%, because manufacturing will grow, so therefore there is bound to be little decline in services, which is currently almost 2/3, maybe 60% of economy, say $3 trillion. And in that, 12 champion sectors we already identified, which will actually make that 60% of the GDP $5 trillion, that is $3 trillion possible. We are working with each and every sector properly. Sector themselves have prepared action plan. We are discussing with the states and we are working on it. And obviously, agriculture, we should contribute to maybe close to that, and allied services and other activities. And this is a vision in which we feel that at least 40% should come from foreign trade. Because foreign trade can actually propel the Indian economies. But as I said, and when I'm saying again, I repeat, foreign trade does not include only exports. And exports does not only include merchandise, it also includes services. Otherwise, people will say how you came out with these numbers. So, foreign trade is an important driver for growth, for domestic economy, as well as obviously we'll get an incremental output which can be sold outside and definitely get the benefits out of it. So, services export in an incremental way is going to be more than the merchandise export. Already the trends are visible, but you will see more of that as you go along. And for that, of course, our strategy is to integrate with the world. First, therefore, we want to promote multilateralism, and we are very strong votary of making sure that the WTO becomes relevant, efficient, and stronger. And we are working on it. We had a mini-ministerial meeting here with 53 countries participating, just after a disastrous outcome or no outcome at Buenos Aires. And since then, we have been very aggressively pursuing it. We are working with quite a few countries to come out with an agenda which will be acceptable to more or less all the countries, to make sure that WTO becomes relevant and center of the entire global trade, and therefore we are working. Also, we are working with bilateral negotiations, and therefore we are working with EU, we are working with Africa, we are working with Latin America and many other geographies to ensure that we work on that. Already we have got agreements with ASEAN, we already got with Korea, Japan, and maybe now RCEP is something which is already being discussed. RCEP will be one of the largest trading bloc in the world if it happens and when it happens. But it's something which we are all working together and bilaterally. At the same time, we are also pushing our relationship, this is plurilaterally, but working relationship with bilateral countries, and we are also working on that. So exports of service and merchandise both will drive the growth also in a significant way. But for that, as I said, what is important is the disturbing trends in the global trade have to be properly dealt with. And therefore, I think all the countries in the world are going to suffer if the world trade is not progressing the way it has progressed. Because as we have seen that all countries in some factor or the other have benefited from global trade. Some have obviously benefited most, like China, but some others have also benefited obviously. And now, probably those who did not benefit as much, it is their turn to benefit. And at that time, there are question marks, which is really a sad commentary on some of the countries which are trying to do it. But we'll definitely push this and make sure that world trade becomes participatory, transparent, and also something which all countries can enjoy the benefit of that. So India is not just for pushing for itself, our own cause, but also the cause of the world trade to benefit all the countries. I think in that context, again, the policy will play a key role. How to make the global trade policy which will be acceptable to the world. So while we need to focus, and rightly you are India Policy Forum, but as we have seen that what we will prescribe as a solution for India on the global trade, in a way will be applicable to the rest of the world also, because we are so integrated. So therefore, something like this will also be very useful. So I really thank you for finding time to participate in this program. I had to go and, I just came out of our Korean president is here. So I had to participate in the program with him. But I was very keen to come because firstly, Dr. Shekhar is my very good friend, and all of you, the brilliant minds who are here, would probably help us to find out a way of dealing with domestic issues, issues related to global issues, and many part of that. But policy is a very key element of starting any intervention for changing any part. Subsequently, obviously, if you don't have policy, what will you implement? If you have wrong policy, of course, as I said, but having a policy is very important. And policy and its implementation finally, so will be very useful. So you are a policy idea people. I am supposed to be a maker as well as implementer. And I think if we have a proper relationship between two of us, will really be extremely useful for me and my government. So I really wish to please continue with this endeavor of offering your advice. I have got a good fortune of working with quite a few of you who are sitting here, and I can see them, and I offer my best regards and respect to them, and looking forward to working with others in the years to come. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope you will continue. One day you will invite me to sit there and also listen to some of the speeches one day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suresh. It's very kind of you. I know you are out of time. Would you have a minute or so for a question or two? No, you will have to run. Okay. Karthik then.
Yeah, on behalf of the IPF, I would just like to thank Honorable Minister for taking the time. And I think just the fact that he had to leave that delegation, it just highlights how different and difficult, like, I mean, you know, these two worlds are. There's the timeline of academic research, which takes many, many years and painful attention to every micro detail of your paper and, you know, referee comments. And there's the world of policy where you're just responding in real time and just simply don't have the, you know, you just have to kind of work with the best you have. And so, and these are very, very different worlds. And I think a lot of structural work is required to kind of make that integration better. And we hope the IPF is one contributor to that, and the goal here is, you know, the attraction for the authors has always been that when you do the work in putting a paper, we try to find a discussant and chair who's directly in that area of policy. And for the policymakers, the hope here is that these papers synthesize what we know in different bodies of work. So thank you once again to the Minister for coming and just encouraging all the work with his presence, and we look forward to continued engagement.